Maniacs, welcome back to the channel. Your local bedhead here. We are going to be doing something I kind of wanted to do for a while, ever watching Side Eye Guy's video, which was compare the scenes side by side, basically, from the real events of this Warren interview with the scene from The Conjuring 2, which was, oddly enough, not even in lines with each other. It doesn't feel like it was really too accurate, and I was feeling that from the get-go when I watched the real events. I'm like, ooh, this Hollywoodized version does not really feel like the real interview that happened. And I was like, you know, we got to take a look at this. We got to really dive into this and see what Hollywood did to make the Warrens look more graceful or a little bit more angelic. I don't even know the word I want to use. A little bit more nicer than what they appeared to be in the real interview. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to start this off with probably the real interview, and then I'm going to move into the movie scene. Okay, and I might have to edit this and like crop a little bit and like edit, because, copyright and everything. But we're going to go ahead and do this really quick. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and this is just me giving my personal thoughts. I think Hollywoodized the shit out of the Warrens. I love the characters in the movies. The movies are actually a lot of fun. The first Conjuring film, I still stand by as being one of the best haunted house films I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, I genuinely love the Conjuring 1 and 2. Really good stuff, but that does not mean I don't have my problems, and it certainly doesn't mean that I don't have my problems now knowing more about what I know. So let's go ahead and dive into it, and I'll give you guys my thoughts. Okay, what I really want to do is I want to actually watch the Warrens part. I have already seen most of this, or, well, a good little portion of it, at least from the Side Eye Guy. But I really want to see the back and forth between Ed Warren and this is the exact interview that they are referencing in The Conjuring 2. I mean, there are too many identical, relatable things that are said that match too well.
Ghostbusters, who Alan Carmen said saved their lives. Ed, you both launched an investigation into the house, and you discovered a very shocking thing that actually happened in the funeral parlor involving the bodies. What happened?
Well, we feel through our investigation that necrophilia, or abuse of corpses, had occurred in that home. Not necessarily by the undertaker, it could be anybody that went in there. Now, this case is not as isolated as these three people would have us think. We have over 70 cases very similar to the Snedekers. And remember that the church was involved in this.
Who was the priest? Everyone seems to have a disagreement.
We can tell you that the chancellery was involved. The priest that was involved there was a Father A, who was on 2020. And there was also 3 other priests, and this can be borne out through the official records of the chancellery in Hartford.
Yes.
How about a name? Just one name.
Father A is the name I give you. I don't have to give you.
I don't like his responses, and he points, which is obviously extremely rude. Not as classy as, the Ed Warren that we know from the movies. I just feel like he wouldn't be sitting there pointing at somebody and saying this, that, and this. I feel like they're just too different. They're too different. Why can't you give the name of the father? Why is that such a bad question to ask? I don't know myself. Maybe because he doesn't want the press to like go over there. Maybe he has his reasons. I could be maybe completely missing that. But it's maybe the attitude that he gives after which rubs me the wrong way. I don't have to tell you anything. It's like we're trying to rationalize and we're trying to determine whether or not some family is lying or not. So when you have an attitude and get defensive like that, it doesn't help their case. In my personal opinion, it doesn't. It just makes them look a little bit more suspicious, and that you're defending them and trying to hide whatever you're trying to hide. That's what it looks like when you're getting an attitude and you're pointing a finger. It looks like you're trying to remain the dominant one in the conversation, so you don't have to answer any of these questions. It's a whole thing. I want to see the conversation between these two right here. This should be it.
Who is a skeptic on this whole matter? Joe, you say the investigations the Warrens conducted is baloney. Why?
Well, I've investigated haunted houses for some 20 years and a professional psychologist. Pardon?
Is there such a thing?
I've not met a house that I thought was haunted. I think the Warrens have never met a house that they didn't think was haunted.
I think that you are mistaken.
I was on the show with this man once before.
It's my turn.
You made a statement.
I've heard that you were a loudmouth who shouted people down. Just give me my chance to talk.
I won't give you a chance.
You did that to me last show we were on.
A bunch of lies.
Joe, I'll give you your chance.
We have the proof.
You're a loudmouth, Warren, and we all know it, but if you'll just let me finish.
This is not the Warren they presented in the movie. Okay, I watched The Conjuring 2 literally the other day because the new trailer came out. I watched the first Conjuring. I watched the second one. Completely different tone and attitude to Warren here. Completely different. If this is the Warren that they presented in the actual, film, I don't think people would like him as much. And it had nothing to do with his wife. Nothing to do. As a matter of fact, he didn't even bring his wife into it. He just said, the Warrens, they probably have never gone into a house that wasn't haunted. And judging by all the artifacts they have, I could tell you that's probably right. They have like artifacts from hundreds of thousands of cases, as if like every location that they went to was in fact like possessed or haunted by something that was just evidently a conduit for whatever was going on, right? Like they have something for almost each investigation. Like, yeah, there's kind of truth to that too, because they brought something back from every investigation. It was.
When you're concerned, I'm allowed now.
Go ahead, Joe.
Try to show a little
Joe,
class.
I
You're
don't
on
have a
national
lot of
TV.
time.
No, I'm not going to
Joe?
give class to somebody who's sitting here. You'll have nothing but lying.
Ed, let Joe just explain.
Again, there's no proof that he's lying. He just said that I don't think there's a house that you've gone into that you haven't said is haunted. It was an understandable statement to make. Now, obviously, I don't know whether or not if the Warrens were truthful or not. There's a lot of evidence that would suggest otherwise. Seriously, there is. Whether people want to acknowledge it or not is up to them. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and argue with somebody who just truly wants to believe the Warrens were 100%. And if you do, the more power to you. I would just tell you that I find certain things really shady about them, and I find certain things that they say off because they don't prove anything. They don't show factual evidence. They never showed factual evidence for the Annabelle situation, which was a pretty big statement to make, that someone had died after they had encountered Annabelle and were rude to it. Sounds like something that would make people want to go to the museum to see if the legends are true, and I haven't heard about a death ever since with Annabelle.
Be careful who you call a liar.
Well, what would you do about it?
What are you going to do about it?
Guys, Joe, point by point.
Yes, one thing that the houses that sincere people report that they think are haunted usually follow certain patterns. This is a hodgepodge of the sort of ghost tale, poltergeist, part demon, part this, part that.
Were you there?
We saw a similar pattern with the Amityville Horror, a case that the Warrens thought was genuine.
We didn't
It
think
turned
we knew.
out to be a blatant
Nobody
hoax.
ever proved that.
Concocted over
Nobody
several
ever
bottles
proved
of
it.
wine.
Can
The
you
evidence.
prove it?
Yes, I
No,
can
you
prove
can't.
it. Yes,
You
I
cannot
can.
prove
It's
it.
been proven.
No, it has never
The
been
evidence
proven.
is very clear in the case of the Amityville Horror.
No,
And the whole
no way.
packaging of this story. The book says it's for Halloween release. The book was written by a professional fiction writer who writes.
Granted, now that I rewatch this again, I give a little bit more leeway to Ed Warren for wanting to be as talkative as he is, because he is actually making a lot of statements about every case they have investigated, saying that it was all a hoax. So I do understand why Ed is trying to defend himself. I do. I'm sorry that I didn't get that the first time. I actually understand it a little bit more, and I get why people might have been a little upset with my personal opinion about that. I still stand by that. He should have let him talk. You know, there's obviously a time when Ed would be able to talk and defend himself, but he was trying to cut him off at everything he was saying. Basically, all he said was, can you prove it? Were you there? Hasn't been proven. Are you sure about that? And to me, it's like, okay, how now prove that this house is really haunted? Unfortunately, we live in a world where there are liars and people who want to take advantage. And I think after the many years of watching and hearing interviews about the family who lived in the house, I'm trying to remember their names for the love of God, not the DeFeo family. The DeFeo family were the ones that unfortunately lost their lives in the house because of the son, who was pretty much an alcoholic, drug addict, I think, at the time. So that would make perfect sense why he would lose it. I mean, his story changes every time. His story literally changes every time about what happened in the house. There have been interviews with like private detectives and people who have interviewed him where he is like changing his story all the time. And the only thing about the Amityville Horror situation that really kind of freaks me out and surprises me is the fact that nobody heard the gunshots. But when it comes to Ronald DeFeo Jr., I think is his name, Ronnie DeFeo Jr., I personally believe the guy had already had a lot of problems. I heard the family was abusive towards him, the dad specifically. So he might have snapped after having too many drinks. This is a legitimate, yes, rational, logical look at what could have happened, because yes, a lot of people snap under the influence of something, and they can unfortunately take lives because of it. And he does not seem like a mentally all there kind of guy to begin with. So there's a lot. The Lutz family apparently were shady as hell. A lot of people said George was running with the idea after they bought the house to try to sell books and try to make a fortune off of the concept of it being haunted. The more you go into the research of who these people are and what they're capable of, the more you start questioning their legitimacy. So I heard a lot about him, and I've seen a lot of interviews that would lead into what people were claiming about him. Having said that, let's go ahead and continue.
Horror stories.
Joe,
This whole packaging is a crock.
Joe, does the church admit to exorcism?
He's an atheist. How would he know?
According to a newspaper article that I have, the Bridgeport newspaper, the diocese refuses to confirm that they had any exorcism there.
It wasn't
if there
done by
was,
the operative.
if there
Sally,
was
I
an
have a
exorcism,
tape of
I
an
don't
exorcism
understand
from
why
a
there is
priest.
any reason why they can't
wasn't
come out
done
and
for
say so.
Bridgeport.
We've
I don't
had priests
understand the
on
need
the
for
show
the
when we've
secrecy.
talked about exorcism.
If I
Take a
can
break.
prove
We'll be
that
right
there
back.
wasn't exorcism,
They really did him dirty in the movie. They made him sound like he was just mean. So yeah. Okay, let's go back. Let's go watch the actual movie version now.
We're back with real-life ghost hunters Ed and Lorraine Warren talking about their experiences at the Amityville house. And now we're going to talk to my next guest, Dr. Stephen Kaplan, who says that the investigations the Warrens conducted into the Amityville haunting is a load of hogwash. Why is that?
Well, it's been well established that Amityville was a blatant hoax, but that hasn't
that's never been
stopped
proven.
Yes, it has. The Lutz family made everything up so they could profit off of all the publicity.
That's just not true. Look, we see this all the time. It's very easy to sit on the outside and pick apart their story, but it's something very different to have been there and experienced it for yourself.
I don't need to go to the moon to know that it's not made out of green cheese. Listen, Ed Warren's never seen a house that he didn't think was haunted. And by the time his wife is done blowing...
This part never happened. I think they really... I obviously know why they brought her into it specifically, because it's about the romance. It's about the love they have. So he obviously loses his temper because he brings his wife into it.
Smoke and ringing bells, they've got everybody else believing in ghosts, too.
What exactly are you a doctor of, anyway?
Come on, Warren, try and show a little class,
I'm not
will
going to show
ya?
class as somebody who's sitting here telling lies about my wife and
Be
me.
careful who you call a liar.
What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, they really made him look like the bad guy in that conversation, which wasn't the case at all. Kept trying to, like, he was, like, letting him talk. He was at least letting him say what he wanted to say. He would jump in and chime in, but he wasn't, like, sitting there like, hey, can you prove it? Can you prove it? Can you prove it? No, I'm not going to let you talk. No, he wasn't doing that, like, in this movie. He was just, and then this guy bringing his wife into it, they really did this guy dirty in the movie. Let's go back and watch it.
That's just not true.
Okay, that part, that felt like Ed. Okay, that's just not true. That felt like Ed, the real Ed.
Look, we see this all the time. It's very easy to sit on the outside and pick apart their story, but it's something very different to have been there and experienced it for yourself.
I don't need to go to the moon to know that it's not made out of green cheese. Listen, Ed Warren's never seen a house that he didn't think was haunted. And by the time his wife is done blowing smoke and ringing bells, they've got everybody else believing in ghosts, too.
What exactly are you a doctor of, anyway?
Which Ed never said that.
Yes, I can
you
prove
can't.
it. Yes,
You
I
cannot
can.
prove
It's
it.
been proven.
No, it has never
The
been
evidence
proven.
is very clear in the case of the Amityville Horror.
No,
And the whole
no way.
packaging of this story, the book
Packaging.
says it's for Halloween release. The book was written by a professional fiction writer.
Which, again, was left out of the movie. They did talk about the Amityville whorehouse here, so give them credit. That was true. But they never mentioned the fact that there was a book sold around Halloween. I mean, that does seem like good marketing for a book that's about a haunted house. Sorry, but it does. That would make them look a little sus. And there was a rumor going around where apparently Ed Warren had asked this writer to make the book even scarier because he wanted them to sell. Right? The reviews would come out and people would be like, yeah, this book is terrifying and it's supposedly based on a true story. That's good marketing. That's smart marketing. Around Halloween time, yeah, that book probably made loads of shit.
You're a loudmouth, Warren, and
No,
we
you're
all
the loudmouth.
know it, but if you'll just let me finish.
When you're concerned, I'm a loudmouth.
Go ahead, Joe.
Try to
haven't even heard
show
nothing.
a little
Joe,
class.
I
You're
don't
on
have a
national
lot of
TV.
time.
What exactly are you a doctor of, anyway?
Come on, Warren, try and show a little class,
I'm not
will
going to show
ya?
class as somebody who's sitting here telling lies about my wife and
Be
me.
careful who you call a liar.
What are you going to do about it?
Completely different tone. I don't think I really need to say a whole lot more. how Hollywood really made this guy to be the bad guy here compared to Ed Warren. Like, yeah, he's making some statements in there. Granted, I'll give you, obviously I understand why you'd be frustrated, especially if you feel like you're telling the truth, or maybe perhaps that you're trying to hide something and you don't like this guy kind of saying all the logical sides of it, because that's what he's doing. He's kind of, critical thinking is being thrown out there saying, well, you're selling your book around Halloween time. It's a horror novel. It's like it all adds up to being a giant kind of publicity stunt to try to make profit off of the concept of a haunted house. Yeah, it does. It feels just like that. There's no getting around it. It feels just like that. And then we go to Google, which says, how much of the Amityville Horror is true? The story of the Amityville Horror, as depicted in books and movies, is largely a fabrication, though it does have some bias in the real-life DeFeo family murders that occurred at the Amityville house. So everything with the DeFeo family was 100% real. That happened. Whether it was actually caused by supernatural entities or not has not been proven. There was a lot that this man was going through that really made it hard to really believe that there were spirits around and causing this. But the Lutz family, who moved into the house a year later, claimed to have experienced horrific paranormal activity, prompting them to flee after 28 days. However, many, including DeFeo's lawyer, some of the Lutz children have stated that the story was largely a hoax, with elements of truth being mixed in with fictional embellishments. Even the children of the Lutz family have said this was a hoax. I don't know how you argue with that. I do not know how you argue with that. If the Lutz children are saying it was a hoax, it was probably a hoax. Okay, so 666 was written before the Amityville Horror. So this was his first novel. Okay, that threw me off a little bit. Because if you go to Google, it says 1981. This must have been a re-release or something like that. This one doesn't give a date. I'm assuming this was his first novel right here. At least that's what it looks like to me. That was his first novel. So if he wrote 666, Ed and Lorraine saw this, or Ed saw this, he probably took it as a good business opportunity. Maybe asking an author who was just getting started to handle the Amityville Horror was a good idea, because he obviously knew that this was going to be a big thing, and was giving this author a chance to rising to stardom if he helped him with the Amityville Horror, saying you're going to make a load of money if you do this. And with it not being like a very popular author at the time, well, then he wouldn't have to worry about saying what he said to him, and that author kind of going behind his back and saying what it is, because he was giving him an opportunity to make a lot of money, which is probably something this author was like all for. Not saying that as an actual fact, but just a theory. Seems like he was pretty big into the whole evil spiritual stuff too, so the Amityville Horror situation would be a big deal for him.
The Lutz family made everything up so they could profit off of all the publicity.
That's just not true.
And yeah, for Ed to sit there and say that's not true, even knowing he's not proving anything, he has no proof that these people were telling the truth. Only because Lorraine went into the house and saw some supposed evil shit. That's all they got, and even that is kind of questionable.
Look, we see this all the time. It's very easy to sit on the outside and pick apart their story, but it's something very different to have been there and experienced it for yourself.
I don't need to go to the moon to know that it's not made out of green cheese. Listen, Ed Warren's never seen a house that he didn't think was haunted. And by the time his wife is done blowing smoke and ringing bells, they've got everybody else believing in ghosts too.
What exactly are you a doctor of anyway?
Come on, Warren, try and show a little class.
I'm not going to show classes.
Even knowing this character right here was very classless by calling her out specifically. I'm now criticizing the movie. He's like, show some class for saying, what are you a doctor of? After he just got saying, after his wife is done blowing smoke. It's like, why don't you show some class?
Somebody who's sitting here telling lies about my wife and me.
Be careful who you call a liar.
What are you going to do about it?
Even knowing Ed in real life was calling this man a liar first. Yeah. If that was shown in the movie, these characters would not be as likable.
I'm not shouting people down. Just give me my chance to talk. I've not met a house that I thought was haunted. I think the Warrens have never met a house that they didn't think was haunted.
Which can be really insinuating a lot. Doesn't mean he was calling them lying. He's just like, well, if you believe in that stuff and you go into a house, you might come out saying it's haunted. Because anything that's happening there, you might believe is haunted. But he wasn't like calling him an outright liar.
Just give me my chance to talk.
You did that to me last show we were on.
Joe.
To be fair, I do think that you could have taken that as if he was calling them liars. They believe every house they've gone to is haunted. That you could have insinuated that, yeah, he could be calling them liars right there, which I think he probably was, but he could have meant that in many different ways. He doesn't necessarily mean he was outright calling them a liar. It was a pretty polite way of calling them a liar, but it wasn't outright calling them a liar. Ed's the one who actually started pointing his finger and saying that you're straight up lying.
I'll give you your chance.
You're a loudmouth.
And then he says he has the evidence and the proof, but has never provided that evidence and proof. If you have the evidence and proof, what is your evidence and proof, right? That's the main thing. Why didn't you bring it on the show? Why didn't you show, like, that would have helped your case. But that's not what they really decided to do here. They decided to say anybody who was saying that they were lying or not being honest about it were liars.
Were you there?
We saw a similar pattern with the Amityville Horror, a case that the Warrens thought was genuine.
And most of the time, when people go to these locations, nothing happens. Nothing ever happens. People like Ed Warren in these situations where they will look at you and say, were you there? Did you experience that? Have you ever been to the house? Have you? Normally, when people go to these houses, most of the time, if there was any chance of any paranormal activity happening, all of it can be debunked and explained.
We didn't
It
think
turned
we knew.
out to be a blatant
Nobody
hoax
ever proved that.
concocted over
Nobody
several
ever
bottles
proved
of
it.
wine.
Can
The
you
evidence,
prove it?
yes, I
No,
can
you
prove
can't.
it. Yes,
You
I
cannot
can.
prove
It's
it.
been proven.
No, it has never
The
been
evidence
proven.
is very clear in the case of the Amityville Horror.
No,
And the whole
no way.
packaging of this story, the book says it's for Halloween release. The book was written by a professional fiction writer who writes horror stories.
Joe,
This
does the
whole
church-
packaging is a
does the-
crock.
Joe, does the church admit to exorcism?
He's an atheist.
According
How would he
to
know?
They got some of the things right, but they got the tone wrong. They got the tone wrong. These two are obviously the good people in the situation. This guy is the mean skeptic, starts criticizing everything. The mean person. They're mean. That's the whole idea.
By the time his wife is done blowing smoke and ringing bells, they've got everybody else believing in ghosts too.
What exactly are you a doctor of anyway?
Come on, Warren, try and show a little class.
I'm not
will
going to show
ya?
class as somebody who's sitting here telling lies about my wife and
Be
me.
careful who you call a liar.
What are you going to do about it?
So interesting. So interesting how this played out. Mean isn't really the word I would use to describe what the movies try to present skeptics as. Obviously, I was just saying mean because that's what was coming to my mind. But what I'd really say the movies try to do is present skeptics as know-it-alls. They're know-it-alls. The logic is irrelevant. What we should be doing is trusting the people, the families who are going through this, not looking at the logic. We got to have that leap of faith, which is what the Conjuring films love to promote, is that leap of faith, you know, trust in people when nobody else will, even knowing, even in the Conjuring 2, a lot of the evidence, even they acknowledged, was pretty, making it look obvious they were faking, but we still had to have that leap of faith, and then overall, that's what Lorraine Warren did, was had that leap of faith. She saw a vision at the end, and yada yada. We all know the story. There was a ghost trying to make people believe it wasn't real, so that so that it can do what it wants to do with them. That's basically where they went with it, which is very coincidental, and of course that does make me think that the family were lying more. But having said that, because it's a movie at the end of the day, it's a movie. It's made for entertainment. It was a movie. That's what it is. Having said that, though, there is a part of me that's like, kind of with Bathsheba Sherman, what the movie did, the original Conjuring did, I feel like they did the same thing with Joe Nickel here, who they kind of made come off like a know-it-all. They made him look like he wasn't interested in having a conversation. He was just more there just to say how the Warrens were a bunch of liars and they were just full of shit, and he was going to have, personally after the wife. I mean, they really made him look bad here, which wasn't the case at all with the real interview. The real interview, he actually seemed like a guy who was trying to have a legitimate conversation. Yeah, there's really no way of making it sound nice when you're calling someone a liar, but he wasn't like going at it like Ed was, where Ed was just blatantly calling him a liar to his face. And he was trying to keep the peace. He was keeping calm. He was just saying, hey, keep a little, show a little class when we're on live television. I'm just trying to talk. Calling him a liar to his face. It was definitely not the same Ed Warren that we saw in the movie, but for some reason, they had those roles switched when presenting them in the movie. It was more of Ed being the reasonable one, while this guy was just being a know-it-all jackass, which just unfortunately wasn't the case in the real situation. It bothered me a little bit, watching that real interview and then going back to the movie and watching the interview in the movie, where it was just one-sided. It was like, oh, well, obviously I'm going to be on Ed and Lorraine Warren's side because they're actually being nice here while this guy's just being a dick. And man, if they presented it like it was in real life, which I really hope one day we get like actual movies with the Warrens where they actually start showing a little bit more of those sides of them, the attitude that Ed had. I mean, when I'm saying the Warrens, I'm specifically trying to mean Ed Warren was really the one with the attitude. Lorraine didn't really say much in that interview. She was kind of, laid back, and I really got to be careful when I say the Warrens. Obviously, I don't know if I trust either of them. I'm not saying Lorraine's a bad person. Ed has rubbed me the wrong way many times recently, hearing things about him, and that's pretty big. That's a pretty big statement coming from somebody who's also been criticized for potentially, not being truthful with her audiences. I mean, it's crazy that people are really not believing in the Warrens anymore because a lot of things are just coming to light. That's one of the reasons why you shouldn't lie. You got to be careful when you're lying to audiences, people, because that shit will come back to bite you. And things that you probably were hoping were going to stay dormant and secret will come out someday, regardless if you want them or not. I'm hearing that Boo Productions has come out with a video recently, which everybody's talking about, that shows the Warren Foundation in a different light than what it normally was looked at. So, yeah, these things are just beginning to show more. It's one of the. I'm excited for the new Conjuring film, but I'm also not, because I know as much as I do now about the Warrens. And if anybody here wants to criticize me or comment in the comment section about how I'm just being an unrational jackass and I'm just not giving them a fair shot, I'm biased, trust me, do your research on it. Go in, look at some of the things that people are posting, look at the evidence they're providing, and you will start seeing that, yeah, these guys, this couple might not have been that couple that was presented to us in those movies. They're actually far different. Let me know what you think. And look, at the end of the day, I know it's a movie, I know it's entertainment, but man, it doesn't help when skeptics are presented this way. They're just not. It doesn't help. It just makes the debunkers, the skeptics, people want to label them as bullies because they're throwing in the rational, logical thinking when it comes to the paranormal. But unfortunately, already they're being labeled as know-it-alls, bullies, unreasonable. You can't even talk to them. And it doesn't help. I think logic is needed in the paranormal. It's not a bad thing to have someone next to you saying, hey, actually, that was caused by the wind because there's an air conditioner behind the door. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing, and that helps weed out the bullshit from the real evidence. And when you got proof like these people did, when it came to the book, the Amityville Horror book, yeah, that was being sold around September, 1 month before October. A haunted house book coming out a month before Halloween is going to make some big bucks. They knew what they were doing. There's no getting around that. There is no coincidence in that. So let me know what you think in the comments section. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. This is just my opinion. These are just my thoughts. You don't have to agree with them. You can absolutely leave your opinions down below, whether they're not for me or for me. Let me know what you think. I'll see you all in the next one. Do take care.
Reactions are nothing new. However, there is one man.